Okay, let's picture this. It's September 1962.
Right.
President Kennedy gets up there and he just throws down this incredible challenge, land a man on the moon
And bring him back safely.
and bring him back, all before the end of the decade.
It sounds almost crazy now looking back.
Totally. Because at the time, I mean, they were still working out how astronauts could even, like, work outside the spaceship.
Spacewalks were brand new territory.
Yeah.
And docking. Two ships meeting up in space.
Pure science fiction back then. And the moon itself, nobody knew was it solid ground or, like, quicksand.
Yeah, fluffy powder that could just swallow the lander. That was a genuine concern.
Someone involved even admitted they were struggling with just, like, basic Earth orbit math. Never mind getting to the moon. Talk about the ultimate deep dive into the unknown.
It really puts it in perspective, the sheer number of fundamental problems they had to solve, not just the big, flashy ones.
No, the real nuts and bolts stuff in an environment they barely understood.
The uncertainty was just immense, absolutely staggering.
And that whole spirit, tackling what looks completely impossible, that's what we're digging into today. We're looking at some core ideas from Ozan Varol's book, Think Like a Rocket Scientist.
Great book.
Yeah. But don't worry, nobody's expecting you to suddenly grasp orbital mechanics. That's not the point.
No, it's about the mindset.
Exactly. The fundamental ways rocket scientists think, how they face down that massive uncertainty, how they engineer solutions when things look totally unsolvable.
And the idea is to take those really powerful approaches developed in this, incredibly high-stakes world.
Right.
And see how we can use them as tools for the challenges, well, everyone faces. In work, creative stuff, personal life, whatever.
And that's really our mission for you today. We know you want to get to the heart of things quickly, thoroughly. You like those aha moments.
Without drowning in jargon.
Yeah, without feeling totally overwhelmed. So think of this as like your shortcut. We've gone through the material articles, research, the book itself, obviously.
Synthesizing it.
To pull out those key thinking patterns from rocket science that you can actually, put into practice pretty quickly.
And that's where the value is, right? Seeing how different bits of information connect. It's rarely just one source with all the answers.
Definitely. It's putting it all together.
You get a much richer picture that way.
So for this deep dive, we're focusing on two kind of foundational things from the rocket scientist's toolkit.
Right.
First, how they embrace and crucially manage uncertainty. And second, it's a really powerful idea of first principles thinking.
Two huge concepts.
And they're not just for launching rockets. They have surprisingly practical relevance for, like, innovation, solving tough problems.
And even just understanding why we sometimes get stuck doing things the old way.
Totally. Okay, so the moonshot, the ultimate uncertain mission. How do rocket scientists even start? How do they wrap their heads around that kind of just ambiguity?
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because real progress, like the big leaps forward, it almost always happens when things are uncertain.
Yeah, when you step into the unknown.
But we, as humans, we're sort of wired to want certainty. We crave predictability.
It's a constant tension.
It is, which makes it kind of fascinating, almost comforting, to hear about these super logical, analytical people.
Rocket scientists.
Yeah, developing these like quirky rituals to cope with the extreme uncertainty.
Oh, like the peanuts. I've heard about that.
Exactly, the peanuts in mission control during launches. Or engineers having specific lucky genes they'd only wear for critical maneuvers.
Or little talismans, right? Mementos from successful missions.
It feels like this very human thing, trying to grasp some tiny bit of control when almost everything else is unknown.
It really highlights the stakes, doesn't it? Even with all the math, all the prep.
The pressure is immense. And these rituals, they can be like a psychological anchor, a way to manage that stress.
But it's not like they skip the hard work because they have lucky peanuts.
Oh, absolutely not. That's key. It doesn't replace the intense focus, the meticulous preparation, the rigorous analysis. It's finding a balance, maybe, between the human need for some comfort and the sheer demands of the job.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then you see it, right, that explosion of emotion in mission control after, say, a successful moon landing.
Oh, yeah.
The cheering, the hugging, people literally jumping up and down. You just feel the release.
It's the weight of that uncertainty finally lifting. They've wrestled this beast of uncertainty, as the book calls it, and they've won, for that moment anyway.
That collective exhale.
It's incredibly powerful. Years of work battling the unknown, culminating in that success. And speaking of uncertainty on a grand scale, it makes you think of the pale blue dot photo.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That tiny speck.
Yeah.
Earth. seen from billions of miles away, just hanging in a sunbeam.
It really does shift your perspective.
Completely. It kind of forces you to confront those huge questions about, our existence, how fragile everything is, our place in this massive universe. Certainty feels pretty small suddenly.
It's incredibly humbling. And that connects to this idea of um, known unknowns versus unknown unknowns, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Donald Rumsfeld made it famous, but it's a really vital distinction, especially in complex projects.
We're usually more freaked out by the unknown unknowns, aren't we? The things we don't even know we don't know.
That's generally true. The known unknowns, well, you can at least anticipate them. You know they're out there, even if you don't have the exact answer yet.
Like for Apollo, maybe the exact level of radiation on the moon. They knew it was a thing, but not the precise number.
Precisely. It's a known unknown.
Mm.
You can plan for it, build in shielding, monitor it. But the unknown unknowns, maybe an unexpected equipment failure caused by some weird interaction in the vacuum of space that nobody predicted.
Right, something totally unforeseen.
Those are the things that can really derail a mission.
Mm.
Or any big project, really.
Yeah.
And that's where the proactive mindset of rocket scientists really shines.
Okay, so let's get practical. What are some of the ways they actively manage all this uncertainty, the knowns and the unknowns?
Well, one really effective technique is basically naming the fear.
Naming the fear.
Okay, you know that Yoda quote. Named must your fear be, before banish it you can.
Yes.
There's real power in just articulating the worst-case scenarios, writing them down, what exactly could go wrong, and maybe even, thinking about how likely is that, really.
So it makes it less fuzzy, less like this big, scary cloud hanging over you.
Exactly. It turns that vague anxiety into something more concrete, something you can actually start to address. It defangs the uncertainty in a way.
That resonates. Like when you're stuck on a problem and just talking it through, even just saying it out loud, suddenly makes it seem less impossible.
Mm-hmm. Same principle.
Okay, so naming the fear. What else? What's another key strategy?
Redundancy. Now, normally we hear redundant and think, oh, that's unnecessary, repetitive.
Yeah, you're being redundant.
Right. But in rocket science and engineering in general, redundancy is absolutely critical. It means having backup systems.
Okay, like spares.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Backup systems designed so that if one component fails, the whole thing doesn't collapse. No single point of failure.
Okay. Like your computer backing itself up automatically. Or a plane having more than one engine.
Perfect examples. It's about designing resilience into the system, building it so it can keep going even when something breaks.
That makes you think, doesn't it? About your own work, or even just life. Where are my single points of failure? What are my backup plans? Who are the people I rely on if, plan A goes wrong?
It's a really useful exercise. And closely related is the idea of margins of safety.
Margins of safety, so like adding a buffer.
Exactly. Designing things with extra capacity, extra strength, beyond what the basic calculations say is strictly needed.
So if the math says the wall needs to be this thick, you make it a little bit thicker just in case.
Precisely. Or you carry a bit more fuel than the absolute minimum calculated for the trip.
Right, because maybe the trip takes longer, or you hit unexpected turbulence, metaphorically speaking.
It's about building in room to handle the unexpected, accounting for unforeseen stresses, conditions you didn't predict, even just slight errors in the original math, giving yourself some wiggle room.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got naming fears, building in redundancy, adding safety margins, ways to cope with uncertainty.
Now let's shift gears to this first principles thing. What exactly is that?
Okay, so reasoning from first principles. Fundamentally, it's about breaking a problem down to its absolute most basic truths.
The core elements.
The core non-negotiable elements. And crucially, doing it without relying on assumptions or analogies or just how things have always been done before.
So instead of just looking at what worked last time or saying, well, company X does it this way.
You start from scratch, like a blank slate, questioning every single belief you have about the problem.
That's the essence of it. Getting down to the fundamental physics or the core needs or the absolute constraints and relying on reasoning by analogy, just copying others can be a real trap.
How so?
Especially for innovation. The book uses the example of the response to the shoe bomber.
Yeah. Taking off shoes at airport security.
Right. Understandable reaction. But it became hyper-focused on shoes. It's an example of fixing on one specific past event, the analogy, instead of thinking from first principles about, say, the fundamental ways security could be breached.
It's like we create these habits or rules based on something that happened once,
Mm,
and we just keep doing it even if the original reason is gone, or maybe it wasn't even the whole picture to begin with.
exactly. The QWERTY keyboard is like the classic example, isn't it?
Oh, right. Designed to slow typists down on old mechanical typewriters so the keys wouldn't jam.
Yeah. And here we are, decades later, using computers, still stuck with this layout designed for inefficiency.
Because that's just how keyboards are.
Precisely. These ingrained rules, these assumptions, they become invisible. We don't even realize we're operating under them. And that leads to the danger of the everybody else is doing it mentality.
The herd thinking.
Yeah. Warren Buffett warns about it in investing. Astro Teller from Google X warns about it in innovation. If you're just trying to make slightly better versions of what already exists,
You're just in a race with everyone else.
you're in a crowded race, constantly making tiny improvements. The really big leaps, the breakthroughs, they often come when someone steps back and questions the absolute fundamentals.
And Elon Musk and SpaceX are like the poster children for this, according to the book.
Absolutely. He's a prime example. Faced with the, frankly, insane cost of existing rockets,
Right. Billions.
he didn't just shop around for slightly cheaper parts within the existing system. He went back to basics.
Like the physics of rockets.
The fundamental physics of getting mass into orbit and the fundamental cost of the materials needed to build a rocket. What does steel cost? Aluminum? Kerosene.
Not what does a finished rocket engine cost from this supplier.
Exactly. He challenged every assumption, how they were designed, how they were built, how they were launched. The biggest one being
Reusability.
that rockets had to be disposable. That was the prevailing wisdom. He questioned that fundamental premise. Why can't we reuse them? And that thinking obviously led to reusable rockets, completely changing the economics of spaceflight.
So it's about drilling down to those non-negotiable core parts of the problem. For rockets, what were some of those fundamentals he focused on?
Well, like we said, the raw materials. What are the actual market prices for the metals, the fuel components? What's the basic physics involved in generating thrust? What's the absolute minimum energy needed?
Stripping away all the layers of existing industry practice and cost structures.
Right, dissecting it down to the irreducible bits.
Yeah.
And then rebuilding the solution from that foundation, reimagining the whole process.
And that led to some pretty unconventional choices at SpaceX, didn't it? Things that probably made traditional aerospace folks raise their eyebrows.
Oh, for sure. The book mentions things like using relatively simple bathroom stall latches for access panels,
Seriously. Bathroom latches.
apparently, and repurposing safety belts designed for race cars for the astronaut seats because they were robust and, well, cheaper than custom aerospace ones.
Wow. And using computer systems originally made for ATMs.
In some of the earlier rockets, yeah.
Oh.
Finding components that met the functional requirements, the first principles of what was needed, without necessarily carrying the aerospace-grade price tag unless absolutely essential.
Taken individually, those sound maybe small, almost trivial.
But that's the point. When you apply that first principles thinking consistently across the entire system, questioning every cost, every material, every function,
The cumulative effect is huge.
it's transformative, completely changes the game.
It really makes you want to look at your own work, your own thinking. Where am I just following the rules without realizing it?
What are those invisible assumptions? The book even suggests trying to aim for seemingly impossible goals
Why? What does that do?
because it forces you to confront your own limiting beliefs. If you set a goal that seems completely unattainable within the current way of doing things, it makes you question that way of doing things. You have to go back to first principles to even imagine a path forward.
That's a great way to uncover hidden assumptions. And it's not just for tech or engineering, right?
Not at all. Think about creative fields. Steve Martin is a fantastic example.
The comedian.
Yeah. His early stand-up, he deliberately avoided traditional punchlines.
No punchlines. How does that even work?
Oh, well, he questioned the fundamental structure of a joke. What is comedy? What makes people laugh? He went back to the first principles of performance and humor instead of just following the set-up punchline formula everyone else used. It was totally groundbreaking.
Huh. So he stripped comedy down to its basics, too, which kind of links to Occam's razor, doesn't it? The idea that the simplest solution is often the best one.
Absolutely. And you see that in SpaceX's design philosophy, too, particularly with the Falcon 9 rocket.
Yes.
Simplicity was key. Using the same diameter for both stages of the rocket. Using the same Merlin engine design multiple times on the first stage and once on the second. using a common aluminum-lithium alloy for a lot of the structure.
Fewer different parts.
Fewer unique components means simpler manufacturing, easier testing, fewer potential points of failure, lower costs. It's that Occam's razor idea. The simplest, robust design is often the most efficient and reliable.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Pulling it all together, we've looked at how rocket scientists face uncertainty head-on.
Yeah, by naming fears, using redundancy, building in safety margins, practical strategies,
And then we dug into this really powerful way of thinking first principles.
which is all about challenging assumptions, breaking problems down to their fundamental truths, not just copying what's been done before.
So these ideas, they might come from, actual rocket science.
High-tech stuff.
But they're really a framework, aren't they? A way to think that anyone can use to navigate complexity. Whether you're, launching a startup, tackling a big project at work, or even just figuring out a personal challenge.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a mindset.
Yeah.
One that encourages innovation, helps you make better decisions, especially when you don't have all the answers, when things are uncertain, which, let's face it, is most of the time for anything interesting.
It really is. So here's something to chew on. Think about one area, just one, in your life or work where you've kind of always accepted things as they are, the status quo. What fundamental truths might you be missing? What assumptions are you making without even realizing it? And what completely new possibilities might open up if you really dared to question everything from the ground up?
Or just maybe, next time you feel that wave of anxiety about the future,
Yeah.
about some unknown,
Yeah.
try naming the specific fears. Write them down. You might just find that bringing them out into the light gives you back a surprising amount of clarity, maybe even a sense of control.
Powerful stuff. Okay, that's our deep dive for today. Until next time, keep questioning.